Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. Those who knew someone when they were younger who grew up to commit murder, what was their story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A guy I went to middle school with killed his father by shooting him over 20 times. Apparently, he was in the middle of a mental health breakdown and there was suspected drug use. He was an athlete, had a lot of friends, and was always nice. People close to him as he got older probably knew more about his mental health struggles, but it was just a bad situation all around. He was reportedly devastated after he did it, never denied it, and couldn't explain why he would. His entire family and community didn't understand his motive and said that he and his father loved each other and were best friends. Mental health is no joke. Such a sad story all around. His name was Joey, bit of a class clown, generally a good guy, but just really immature. About 5 years after he graduated, he was driving down the main road in our hometown and hit and killed an older guy riding his bicycle. From there, panic brain apparently took over, and he fled the scene and dumped his now dented bumper in the woods a few blocks away and went home like nothing had happened. They caught him pretty fast. Haven't really been keeping up with whatever happened next. Not a high school acquaintance, but college. A friend introduced me to her boyfriend when I ran into them at the grocery store. He later went on to run her over and leave her for dead on the side of a rural road. Unfortunately, this is just a theory, because when she survived, we don't know what happened because the TBI made her lose the memory of the preceding 7 months or so, including that night. He skipped town and hid out in Alaska until they can pick him up on some kind of assault charge, if I recall correctly. He gave me the heebie-jeebies. She was so excited to introduce me, but he seemed awfully nonchalant and had dead shark eyes. I remember he pretended to be kind of nice, but the eyes creeped me the fuck out. He lived in Vancouver. He was a frat boy in undergrad. DV and child abuse led to his conviction. Then, during the summer between his senior year and his first year of med school, his fraternity expelled him. He had completed some undergrad internships and worked the same part-time job throughout undergrad, med school, and residency for a total of 11 years. He got married toward the end of med school. During his residency, he settled a civil lawsuit for medical malpractice that resulted in a pediatric patient's death. After residency, he killed his wife. Seeing his domestic violence conviction years ago and his more recent medical malpractice, it was not at all surprising. Not surprised, a severely bullied kid with, in retrospect, severe unsupported autism and other comorbidities beat his mother to death with a broomstick. This was the 80s, and many neurodivergent kids were just expected to fend for themselves in a high school environment that was ruthlessly brutal compared to the environment I see at my child's high school today. I went to school with Brendan Dassey from Making a Murderer. Most of my memories of Brendan were him getting extra help on assignments from a paraprofessional. His shoulders would slump if someone corrected or chided him for needing help. He'd go nonverbal and shut down, not moving. No way did he murder Teresa Hallbeck. He completely shut down and disassociated during any kind of stress or conflict. He took his own life before he could be charged with murder. I was very surprised by his actions. I went to a small school in a small town, and we had the same classes for basically 7th to 12th grade. Although we weren't friends, we were familiar with each other. He was a smart kid in all my honors classes, kind of funny, and sometimes got into trouble, but never anything too serious. A few years after he graduated, he killed someone at a college party. It was over nothing, and then he fled and took his life. He hurt many people. His family and his friends have never truly been the same. And of course, there's the victim and his family and friends. I've actually randomly come across a few Redditors who knew the person he killed. They were there when it happened. It breaks my heart to hear them discuss just how devastating it was. I never reply. What would I say? Hey, fun fact, I took biology with the guy who killed your friend. Not a fun fact. The older I get, the sadder I feel about it. He had so much potential. His victim also had good potential, and he destroyed it all for no damn good reason. I'm still mad at him for it, and always will be. I did not attend school with him. He worked in the same woodworking firm as my dad, who was his foreman. I remember one day my mom and I went to pick up my dad from work one day like we always did because we only had one car. My dad was walking toward the car. I noticed the guy following him and got all queasy feeling in my stomach. My dad got in the car and shut the door. The windows were down because it was summer. Suddenly, the guy who was following my dad put his arms on the windowsill, stuck his head in aggressively far, and sneered, "Hey, Jerry, thanks for firing me." It was extremely threatening, especially since my dad had my pregnant mom and me in the car with him. To his credit, even though my dad had a lightning-fast temper, he stayed remarkably calm, shrugged his shoulders, and said, "Hey, no problem." The guy kinda stared him down for a second, stood up and walked away, probably because we were in the lumber yard with a bunch of witnesses. The minute he was 2 steps away, my dad threw the car in drive and got us out of there. Years later, I'm like 15, watching the evening news with my parents, and they start covering a story about this guy who murdered his girlfriend. Yep, it was the guy my dad fired all those years ago. I wasn't allowed to swear, but I distinctly remember blurting out, "Holy shit, that's the guy, that guy." I was unable to recall his name. I turned to look at my dad, and he was just staring at the TV while my mom was sitting next to him with this horrified look and her hands covering her mouth. I still get freaked out thinking about it. Not school, but I worked at a supermarket for a night shift manager lady who ended up luring an autistic teen to her house and murdering him. Honestly, she was an exact stereotype of what you would expect a murderer to be like. Poor social skills, bad hygiene. We were talking once and she asked what type of movies I liked, and I said, comedy is probably my favorite category, and she said, I like the gory stuff. I can't enjoy it unless it's insanely gross. As if that was something that would impress me. Like we were 12-year-olds. I remember her staring at me after she said it like she was looking for a reaction from me or a follow-up question so she could keep talking about it. When I saw it on the news, it was almost like a, yeah, I could see that coming moment. I didn't know the kid personally, but from what I heard from people who did know him, they weren't surprised at all he committed murder, but they were surprised by the brutality of the crime. The year after he graduated, he'd somehow lured this girl, who was still currently attending our high school, into a tunnel near our school where he AR'd her, tortured her by stabbing her an ungodly amount of times, and carving up her body, and then he burned her body. He confessed the crime to a friend a few days later, and the friend managed to get him to turn himself in. I just looked it up, and he actually was sentenced to death row for the crime after admitting to AR'ing 3 other girls and saying he should die, which makes him the youngest person at 24 to be sentenced to death row in Nevada. I don't see any articles about him actually being executed, so I imagine he's currently in a prison somewhere. From what I heard from the people who knew him, he was known to be violent and had sexually harassed and threatened girls at school. Apparently, he once cornered a girl in the bathroom after school and threatened her. They started looking all but like the 2 minutes before the final bell rang because of it, but I never heard back from any idea why, until after the murder, and my friend told me about it. Honestly, it was just kind of surreal to hear we had a murderer in our graduating class after how our senior year went. My senior year of high school, we had 2 students die in a single weekend. One suicide and the other accidental from a bunch of kids being around with what they thought was an unloaded gun. Then, like 2 months later, another kid showed up to school with loaded guns in his backpack. He got caught at the door because, thank God, administration took the reports of his threats seriously. My graduating class just feels like it was kind of cursed. All of these stories are sad in their own way, from a few different perspectives. Obviously, the victims and their families and loved ones, but also the state of families that survive after their family member commits a terrible crime. It's not vindicating or validating or admonishing, but it just sucks. I didn't know the kid because I had graduated within a year or two by the time he was old enough to attend my school. At the time, he was 15 or 16 and I was 20. We lived in the same neighborhood, and I'd occasionally see him out and about driving from there to work. One day, I'm driving home from my job, and I get a call from my BFF, who also lived in our neighborhood. We grew up together, and we both worked at the same place, so he knew I just clocked out. He literally tells me, "Dude, are you home?" "Almost. Why?" "Well, when you get there, lock your doors because blank killed his family and is wandering the neighborhood." I got home and passed through a blockade of cops and had to prove that I lived there so they would let me in. We had a shed and an old chicken coop on our property and asked a cop to sweep it to make sure he wasn't ducking out in it. I also told the cops that there was a vacant lot right next to ours and the only thing standing on the property was an old 4-post wooden shed with a tin roof. And the last time I was ever there, I saw a dingy little mattress, condom wrappers, and cigarette and alcohol trash inside that shed. So I figured the neighborhood kids were using it as a hangout. None of the cops went in to check it out. I guess they were scared. They just surrounded the property and stood watch. We learned the next day that they had arrested him. Apparently, after a while, early in the morning, he walked back to his house so he could go sleep in his bed. And of course, there were cops at the house. It's where the murder happened. I don't know how accurate this is, but this is what I was told from another person in the neighborhood. What I do remember, though, is that for a few days later, I'm coming back from work and I see 2 cop cars sitting in the road between my property and the vacant lot I mentioned earlier. The kid was out there on the side of the street in a prison jumpsuit, handcuffed, and there was a detective in his face screaming at him in tough posturing. I didn't get involved. I just figured I must have been right about him ducking into that shed because the other night, and as they were looking for evidence, so I rode by them and went home. My friend was wrong about one thing. He didn't kill his family. He killed his younger sibling and attacked one of his parents before fleeing the home. Last I heard, he's doing life in prison. We graduated in 1994. He was the only black student in our class of close to 300. We were good friends in middle and high school. Racism and bullying undoubtedly plagued him. A group of white guys pursued him a month after graduation, and he managed to escape back to his apartment. He came back out with a semi-automatic gun, killed 2, paralyzed another, and a couple of others got shot but made it out okay. He received a sentence of nearly 20 years. I got beat up in prison terribly. We connected when he got out about 7 or 8 years ago. I was sad and disappointed, but not fully surprised because I had been rooting for him to turn his life around, but I knew that the statistics were against him. It was gang-related. We went to elementary school together and saw each other again in high school, and he had definitely changed and had already been to juvie for petty crimes. He eventually transferred to a continuation school, returned to juvie, and ultimately ended up in jail for drug dealing. I graduated, ran into him from time to time during my party years in college, and we'd occasionally walk down memory lane and talk about what life could have been. It was very clear that we both knew where our lives were heading. He'd stay where he was or move further down to rock bottom, and I'd continue finding my way out and eventually get a mundane but stable career and family life. When he was young, he was very shy, goofy, and wanted to become an animator. He unfortunately got mixed up with gang life and made a harder exterior for himself. During our conversations, I often perceived a glimpse of the child I once saw. However, life can be unpredictable, and individuals may feel trapped by their poor choices. Our conversations were always very bittersweet, and I always felt like neither of us wanted those charts to end because he was forced to go back to that life and be able to finally have some stability and comfort. But instead, he just kept digging himself deeper, and probably when I was 27 or 28, I found out he went to prison for murder. I'm not a high school student, but a college student. I was extremely shocked when I saw on the news that this girl helped her boyfriend and another woman, I'll refer to her as Becky, murder another woman. Becky was jealous that her crush was in love with another woman and not her, Becky. Becky wanted to kill her crush's new girlfriend, so Becky hired the Christian girl and her boyfriend and promised them lots of money. They ended up kidnapping the wrong person, took lots of money away, and then murdered. Then realized they killed another innocent woman and not the target. She's in prison for life, as well as her boyfriend and Becky. I was so shocked that the Christian girl was able to do that. Her parents, who are pastors or deeply religious, were so shocked by their daughter's actions that they even changed their names and towns. It took everybody by surprise. She was so nice and always helping others. Her boyfriend looked like a jerk, but they seemed like an okay-ish couple. Back in '96, my first known murderer was a white poser wannabe thug type. He got arrested first for breaking into our school and stealing computers and was kicked out. Later I found out he killed his girlfriend or something. He was a poser, so I don't think anyone had it in them. Also in California, a dude I played pool with at a local dive bar was convicted of killing his baby mama as well. My wife was like, "I told you that dude was off." So they were creepy, and it wasn't a surprise. Another guy I knew is still on trial. He killed his business partner in disagreement, and he's a minority, so his self-defense approach in a mostly white town is not going so well. This guy was weird but pretty nice, and I believe he did it in self-defense. He's not a big guy. As to why he had a gun on him at all in the office, that's weird. She was a precious gem. Despite facing a challenging childhood, she consistently exhibited kindness. She had a shady relationship with shady men, but that was all she knew due to her background and the circles that she was raised in. Despite being charged with murder, she maintains that if it was an assault that escalated, someone is dead, and she's in prison where she should be, at least for some time, but personally I do believe she's telling the truth. She didn't set out to murder someone in cold blood. The court didn't believe that, and she went down for murder, but personally I do. She was reasonably intelligent and alright looking. If she'd been born into a loving family, she'd probably be a married mom with a middle-class career now. I knew a murderer. He was cool in high school, although we never spoke. We connected in college, and he was one of the only people who treated me like there was nothing wrong with me. College was very alienating. I was gay, but I was also a white man, and that was definitely the last thing you wanted to be in my university. Anywho, he eventually revealed to me he was a white nationalist, and I told him I couldn't go there with him. We stopped talking, and 2 years later, I was sent a news article about him. He and his wife murdered their 5 kids, set their house on fire, and he killed her and himself. He was wearing a mask for whatever reason no one ever figured out. For whatever reason, the local police ignored all the white nationalist activities. It was not at all surprising he became a murderer. It was extremely surprising that the person he murdered was his own mother, who absolutely loved him to the ends of the earth and coddled the bejesus out of him. In my opinion, he showed every sign of child-onset schizophrenia at the age of 10 when he was my classmate, and they let him fly under the radar as quirky and bullied. But the class was ostracizing him for many valid reasons, and no adult would listen to us. He's out now because it was a psychotic episode, and the rest of his insane family vouched for him. He absolutely belongs in a psych institution for life. He's had several psychiatric episodes. They all were aware of them and brushed them off, leading up to the brutal, unprovoked stabbing murder of his mother. His family is not intelligent people and should not be trusted with the care and keeping of such an individual. I, female, was friends with him in high school. He once told me he loved me, but we never dated. He was adopted. His birth mom did drugs while pregnant with him. He ended up being SA'd by his adopted brother. He was unwanted by his adopted parents. Apparently they only wanted his sister when they were adopting, and were somehow talked into taking him as well. He understandably had severe mental health issues. I'm unaware of what he was actually diagnosed with. He used to stab himself with pencils in class and give himself tattoos. He dropped out at some point in high school, and we lost contact. I married someone we were both friends with, and all 3 of us briefly reconnected after high school. He asked my husband to hide stolen goods for him. My husband obviously declined, and we stopped hanging out with him. Fast forward a couple of years, he's on the news because he murdered his best friend, his pregnant girlfriend, and a friend of theirs. He's in prison for life. Honestly, he was always nice to me, and it makes me sad that this is how his life ended up. I feel like life never gave him a chance, but it wasn't a surprise when we heard what happened. Mental health issues, abusive childhood, never feeling wanted by anyone, plus drugs.